We're going to continue our series in Isaiah. Isaiah talking about being bold in a dying world. And really, Pastor Jeremy started this a few weeks ago on accident. But he preached out of the famous Isaiah passage in Isaiah chapter 6, where it talks about God calling Isaiah to be bold for him. In fact, it's the passage where God says, whom shall I send? And I always picture this. When I read through Scripture, I always use my imagination. I love just picturing what it would be, what it would have been like. Because, it's everything in Scripture happened. It's real. It's true. It's 100% true. And I always picture Isaiah, or at least growing up, I always pictured Isaiah being an older man, and sitting down telling his grandchildren or great-grandchildren, I don't know, however, sitting down telling them the story about how God called him. And I always picture him going, yep, I remember when God called me. There is this really weird thing that I saw. There was, I had all these visions, and I was scared at first. Then God made me clean. And then he said, whom shall I send? And I said, send me. And then I picture music playing in the background, the scene fading away, and the words, and he lived happily ever after. You ever thought that? Have you ever pictured that? You hear about, people in Scripture doing something or God calling them, and it's just, you hear, here I am, send me, and they lived happily ever after. No more problems. No more worries. Nothing difficult happened in his life. I just picture that going, because he volunteered to do what God wanted him to do. God made his life easy. Isn't that how we think sometimes? I don't know about you, but sometimes that thought creeps in where I'm doing what God has called. And as long as I'm doing what God has called me to do, I won't have any problems in my life. Maybe a little few ones, because I'm not perfect, I mess up. So I'll have the problems that I create. But certainly, as long as I say, pick me, God, pick me, it's kind of like being in recess when they're picking for dodgeball. You're like, pick me, I want to be first. As long as you're first one to stand up, say, pick me, as long as you say, yes, send me, then God wouldn't have me do something outrageous or something difficult or embarrassing or hard, or God wouldn't make trials come my way or make me walk through difficult things, right? As long as I'm saying, here I am, send me, the scene can just fade into black and say he lived happily ever after. We chuckle and laugh kind of at that, but because we know it's not true, is it? Life is hard. Life can be difficult sometimes. We know that there's times of struggles, and we know it, but sometimes I don't know if we truly believe it. We may not say it out loud, but a lot of times it's apparent in the questions that we ask. When life gets hard, we start saying, well, why, God? Why me? I don't deserve this, do I? God, I have been serving you for how long? I've been serving you for 10 years, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. I've been serving you all this time, and now something's hard in my life. Why me? Why now? I don't deserve it. We say those things and we think those things because I think we believe that if we follow God really, 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 really well, then life will go perfect and easy. If we say, here I am, send me, then God's just got an easy path for us. My mom had this a few years ago come up in her life. I love my mom. My mom is the most amazing, sweet, innocent lady you will ever meet. She is just, she's wonderful. And everyone will probably get to meet her here over the next few years. She'll come several times here. My parents will come in, and she is just joyful and nice and innocent. My mom, a few years ago, had the opportunity to take a new job. She's a teacher's assistant in the Columbus school systems. And she had this opportunity to take a new job, and she was praying about it, and she was like, you know what, Drew, I think God is calling me to take this new position. And she was really excited because she was like, I can't wait to see what God is going to do. You know, I'm going to work for this new teacher. It's in a new school, a new classroom area. And she was so excited. You know, she was like, God provided this job for me. And she was like, here I am. God sent me. And she was so excited until the first day of school started when she met her teacher that she was working for. The meanest, crudest teacher ever. And that is my mom's words, not mine. She said, I could not believe this lady. Every other word was a bad word out of her mouth. She yelled at me. She was mean to me. She was putting me down. She won't let me. And she was like, it was the worst day of work I have ever had. I said, it's okay, Mom. You know, maybe it'll get better. A week went by and she said, it hasn't gotten better. A couple weeks by and she realized that this lady wasn't changing. And it was going to be the hardest year of her working life. And there was a time she was starting to think, well, you know what? I thought this was what God wanted, but maybe it's not. I mean, why would God want me to do something like this? Why would God want me to work for a lady like this? She started to question it because life was getting hard. It wasn't everything's easy. I don't know, maybe it's a job. Maybe you're in a job right now where you're like, you know what, this is what God wanted me to do. This is what God called me to do. I said, here I am, God sent me, but look at the job that I have to do. It's just, I mean, why would God send me there? Why would God have me do this? Maybe it's a relationship that God has called you to mend or to forgive, and you're like, you know what, God, or to stay, and you're like, you know, God, this relationship is so hard. Or that person is so, and you don't even have a word to describe it, and you're like, you really want me to forgive you? What, maybe this isn't it. God, I thought you called me to do something. I thought, I said, here I am, send me, but now it's really difficult. Maybe it's being a parent. Maybe your kids are growing up and you're like, man, it's really difficult. Are you sure, God, you wanted me to be a dad? Or maybe your children are all grown up. They're not who you trained them to be because it's not easy. Or maybe God's calling you to be a witness and you're just like, boy, that's embarrassing. I can't do that. Talk to someone about my faith. Maybe it's just life. Maybe life is just busy, stressful, hard, tiring. Maybe things aren't going your way. And you're saying, but God, I'm trying to do what you want. Why isn't life peaches and cream? Why isn't life easy? And we think back to Isaiah, and he says, here I am, send me. And you think, oh, maybe I wish I could have been him. I wish I could have been him. I wish I could say, send me, and then everything's easy. Well, before you say that, I think Isaiah would say, you know what? Life wasn't always easy. In fact, in Isaiah chapter 20, there's a passage that I want to focus on this morning. Isaiah chapter 20 is where we're gonna hover. And the background to this passage I love because Isaiah is a prophet. God had already called him. He already said, send me. And he's been going around, he's been prophesying against all these nations. He was saying about what's going to happen to Egypt and Babylon, and he was saying some hard things. And most of the time, a lot of times, prophets would speak the word that God gave them. But sometimes God would use the prophet as a living example. For example, Hosea was called to marry a lady that he wasn't, that God knew wasn't going to be faithful, and then to remarry her and forgive her and be in this relationship to show the dynamics of the relationship between God and Israel. Jeremiah does this all the time. In fact, I love the book of Jeremiah. If you ever want an interesting read read through Jeremiah and see everything that he had to do for God. It's great. But Isaiah, God decided to use Isaiah as a living illustration, as a living example. In fact, this is the only recorded time that Isaiah is to be a living example. And usually when that happens, if it's the only time something happens, when there's just something that's different throughout the book, I perk up, I always pay attention. I say, wait, why does God add this in here? So this is the only time God tells Isaiah, or at least recorded that we know of, to be a living example, a living illustration. And it was to prophesy against Egypt and trusting in her power. So this is it. Isaiah chapter 20, verse 1. It says, "In the year that the supreme commander sent by the Sargon king of Assyria came to Ashdod and attacked and captured it, at that time the Lord spoke through Isaiah, son of Amos. He said to him, 'Take off the sackcloth from your body and the sandals from your feet.' And he did so, going around stripped and barefoot. Then the Lord said, 'Just as my servant Isaiah has gone stripped and barefoot for 3 years as a sign and portent against Egypt and Cush, so the king Assyria will lead away stripped and barefoot the Egyptian captives, the Cushite exiles, young and old, with buttocks bared to Egypt's shame. Those who trusted in Cush and boasted in Egypt will be afraid and put to shame. In that day, people who live on the coast will say, "See what has happened to those who relied on those we fled to for help and deliverance from the king of Assyria. How then can we escape?'" Let me explain what happened. Isaiah had burlap. He must have been mourning, and God comes up to Isaiah and he says, "Isaiah, take off your burlap, take off your sandals." And I'm sure Isaiah's like, "Okay." Because he was mourning for someone. He's like, "Okay, take off my burlap, take off my sandals. What am I going to put on? A nice silk thing? What's this illustration going to be?" And God says, "No, you're not going to put anything on. You're going to walk around stripped without sandals. Just for an illustration." Now, a side note here. There is a big debate in the commentary world on whether or not he was all the way naked or if he had his underwear on, okay? So if you're ever going to read through this and you start reading commentaries, there's this big debate. I don't think it matters. All I know is God said, "Isaiah, I want you to do something very difficult and very embarrassing. Something very hard, something that as you walk around, people are going to look at you, people might laugh at you. It is going to be the most difficult time of your life. Isaiah, this is what I want you to do." And I could see Isaiah going, whoa, wait a minute. What? You want me to do what, God? God, that's a little out of my comfort zone. Right? I mean, right here's my comfort zone, God. There you go. I'll get right up here, but God, that's a little out of my comfort zone. And I think God said, "No, it's way out of your comfort zone. There's not even a comfort zone left." I had a good friend back in West Virginia, that God was working on him. Actually, he's actually accepted the call to ministry. He's later in life. He's in his mid-40s now. And God's been working on him, and God had asked him to go and share Christ with his family. This man is a quiet man. You know, he doesn't like to talk a lot. He hates talking in front of adults. And he was talking to me. He was like, "Pastor," he's like, "I don't know if I can do that." He's like, "God, I think he's telling me to go to my family who lives in Baltimore. I think he's telling me to go to my family and tell them about him." But he's like, "I don't know if I can do that. That is like way out of my comfort zone." He's like, "Do you think that's God telling me to do that?" I said, "If he's calling you to get out of your comfort zone, that's probably God." I can see Isaiah going, "Certainly this isn't God. I mean, that's too hard. That's too embarrassing. That's too stressful." I could hear him saying, God, I said, here I am. And when I said, here I am, you're supposed to make my life easy, not difficult. God said, take off your burlap. Walk around for 3 years. 3 long, probably miserable, embarrassing. If you thought you had a bad year, imagine Isaiah. 3 years. And here's what's amazing. Isaiah obeyed. Isaiah listened and obeyed. He did exactly what God wanted, even if it meant complete embarrassment, even if it meant shame for the rest of his life, even if it meant he was going to be called names by all the other prophets and all the other people around. Even if it meant he was going to have a hard life and a headache for 3 years, he did it. Wow, what faith Isaiah had. What faith he had. When he said, here I am, he meant, here I am. When we answer God, when we say, here I am, we better be ready. When we say, God, here I am, send me, pick me, we better be ready, and we better really mean it. I think what happens is sometimes we say it, but we don't mean it. We put stipulations on the send me part. Right? We'll say, hey, God, here I am, send me. I'll go anywhere. I'll do anything you want me to do as long as it's not fill in the blank. Right? I'll do whatever you want as long as I'm not poor. Don't make me poor. As long as I'm happy and I can sing a song, I'll do it. As long as I don't lose any friends, or especially as a teenager, as long as I am still popular, I'll do it. God, here I am, send me, as long as I don't go hungry. As long as I don't get embarrassed, or as long as life isn't stressful, as long as life isn't hard, as long as my kids obey. Fill in the blank. As long as I don't have to deal with the disease or anxiety. You know what mine was coming out of college? Stacy and I were engaged to be married. And I'll probably tell this story a million times. You'll probably be sick of it. Stacy and I were engaged to be married. We graduated at Trinity Wesleyan University. We were going to get married, and I sent my resume out to see where God wanted me to go. And as we were looking, I said, we were talking, Stacy and I were talking, and we said, people, well, where do you want to go? I said, you know what, I will go anywhere as long as it's not Michigan. Ohio. That state up north. That was a bad word in my house. So I will go anywhere as long as it's not Michigan. And my wife said, you know what, I will go anywhere as long as it's not cold. First place God sends us is a place called Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. Which, if you don't know anything about Michigan, here's the hand. Here's the upper peninsula of Michigan. Did you know there's something above there? Yeah. It's on the top. We average 10 feet of snow a year. Yeah, feet. That was my God, I'll do anything as long as it's not fill in the blank. Here's my comfort zone, God. He said, push you over. We think life is going to be easy breezy. We're going to think life is going to be, sitting on the beach. But it won't be. In fact, one of my favorite verses in Scripture is when Paul was writing, he said, consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds. That's a whole sermon, a whole other sermon about considering it pure joy. But the word that always gets me in there is consider it pure joy when, or the NIV says, whenever you face trials of many kinds. God says, sometimes life is going to get hard. God says, sometimes I'm going to ask you to do something that's difficult, that's uncomfortable, that's out of your comfort zone. In fact, Jesus even said it this way, blessed are those who are persecuted for my name's sake. God says there's going to be hard times. He says, I'm asking you to be bold in a dying world. I'm asking you to live countercultural. I'm asking you to go against the grain. And whenever you do that, there's going to be hard times. There's going to be difficult situations that you have to go through. I mean, all you have to do is read through Scripture and look at how God used the different people. How Peter had to go through the hard times. In fact, if you ever read about how he died and the difficult times that he had and all the different times that he was arrested because he followed Jesus. Or Paul. Paul has a scripture in there where he says, I was beaten, I've been, people's thrown rocks at me and tried to kill me. I've done all these different things, all these hard times. And actually, he's listing them as good things for Christ. John, David, King David. He was called to be king, and the first thing he had to do was he had to face a giant. If anybody thinks that was easy, standing up against a guy that's trying to kill you. And then after that, I think everything would be peaches and cream and everything would be rosy. No, David had to actually serve a king that tried to kill him over and over and over again. And David had to be the better man and love and serve that king. Isaiah says, send me. And God says, well, I want you to embarrass yourself for 3 years. And Isaiah says, okay, I'll do it, Lord. Send me. I always wonder if in chapter 6, if while he was talking to God and God says, I need someone to do something crazy for me. I always wonder if God would have said, this is what it's going to be. I wonder if Isaiah would have been as quick to say, here, send me, if he would have known what he had to do. I wonder if he would have still replied, yes, yes, yes. I just think God is calling every one of us. Every one of us in here, God is calling you. He's saying, I need you to be my hands. I need you to be my feet. I need you to be my witnesses in this community. I need you to live for me. And our response is, here I am. And we need to be willing to say that and mean it. We know that we can trust God. Even when he asks us to do something difficult, even when he asks us to go through the trials, even if it's shameful or stressful or hard. At times, God's going to ask us to take steps that we don't even understand why we're taking those steps. I pray that we say, yes, I'll still do it. As John comes up, I want to finish just telling you about a man named Steve. In Bluffton, Indiana, I was a children's pastor. The children's ministry was just booming and things were going great, and I wanted to make some changes in the building for the department. There's this man named Steve on the board. And after I told him what I needed, he was like, well, we don't need to do that. That's going to cost too much. And I was like, but the children, we need it. And he's like, no. So shot it down. Didn't get what I wanted, which is okay. But I challenged the board. I said, why don't you come out on Wednesday night and just see what's happening? Last man I ever expected was Steve to come out on Wednesday night. The next Wednesday, all of a sudden, there's this man, Steve, walks in. He's like, well, Pastor, I don't know why I hate children. He's like, I don't know why God's telling me to come out on Wednesday night because I hate children. Can't stand the little boogers. He's like, but I'm here to help one night. I'll give you one night. because that's what God told me to do, and I don't know why. So I said, well, come on in, Steve. I had a trouble kid that was a horrible family life, always getting in trouble, causing trouble. I started the lesson, the kid was causing trouble, and one rule that we had is after, 3 times, you have to go sit out in the hallway. Well, I told the kid, you're going to have to go sit out in the hallway, and I looked at Steve, and I said, Steve, will you go sit out in the hallway with him? The rest of the night, they sat in the hallway together. At the end of the night, he said, it was amazing. The kid just talked to me. He said, I hate kids, but I kind of like that little boy. I'll see you next week. The next week he came back. Guess what happened? He sat in the hallway with the same kid. Third week he came back. He actually sat with the kid during service. And I think it was the first service the kid made it all the way through. Steve became one of the best children's workers I ever had. Because God told him that I'm going to have you do something difficult. And he said, yes, I'll do it. Even if it means working with little kids that I don't like. I know it doesn't sound like it's much motivation saying that, there's going to be difficult times when you say, here I am. But listen, it's worth it. When we obey God, it is worth it. In fact, next week I want to look at why it's worth it. But for today, I just want to say, as we sing this last song, just say, send me. I will do whatever you want, God. I will go through whatever you ask, because I know it'll be worth it.